All right, settling into your practice today. So you have your props set like so, and then the setting of the props on your being is the next experience. So there's a lot of lateral movement in the approach of our practice to start. So let's sit in front of the bolster. Let's lean back so that the bolster has a kind of dominant elevation, but it also has the opportunity to help you create separation and spaciousness. So when I add my block, I'm going to walk the feet in. I'm going to keep the feet pretty wide so there's absolutely no knee tear that could happen. And so when I lift up my hips and slide the block under the pelvis, I want you to add your belt today. So that whole thing I mentioned about the belt, a certain distance for warrior one, we're gonna wait on that and do that later. So you're gonna either unbuckle it, take it around the legs, or slide it over the legs, and then tighten it up, get a grip of your belt so it's around the, it's close to the top of the thigh so that number one, it'll be easy for you to get out of it. But focus points when I lower my head down now is that there is a relative separation at the leg, right? They're not completely tight together, but you want to feel that you're trying to roll the thighs inwards. So notice if you could stretch your legs down and feel that inward kind of proposition to your legs. So if I slam them together with the belt, it's obvious, but feel if you can actually have the legs with some separation. And then maybe you give it a gentle, persuasive kind of pull with the belt. So reminding that there's an internal cycle of movement, and then take a sandbag and slide that support and maybe feel it kind of slosh a little bit at that upper rib dimension below the sternum. And instead of just below the sternum where the ribs intersect, because you're lifted on the bolster, you likely could slide the sandbag so it feels like it's kind of upper abs is where I like to set it for this breathing exercise. So we're going to use the weight of the sandbag to provide resistance to the diaphragm. And I want you to have that focus of the breath process starting in the internal organs, and then it eventually moves to the surface and the structure. So stretch open the arms. Feel that there's a real kind of curling action with your elbows, your shoulder blades. Everything has like possibilities of expansion, but they're relatively softening to start. And then centering your consciousness simply to breath. Just that experience of focusing along the lateral movement of the lungs and the ribs, right here where your sand is playing a part with that communication to strengthen the diaphragm. Feel when you inhale, there is quite the surge of attention. And then on the exhalation, it might feel not so interesting, right? So it kind of lowers down. It's different when you have the ribs lifted this high versus some other poses we could start with. So it's interesting in half of the exercise and half it's kind of plain. So I want you to try to celebrate that focus in the lateral movement of the ribs. So really feel your arms, if possible, if you've got room, you're trying to spread them out. So even though it feels like the part of your arms that spreads out the ribs is closest to your shoulders and the bones at that piece of the body, just that relative reach of your fingers is plausibly connecting to the whole structure. So featuring spaciousness. Go back to relaxing your eyes. Relax the feet. And as you inhale, feel the breath slightly lifting up that sandbag. And on the exhalation, relax on the out breath. Okay, we're going to turn the sandbag lengthwise from heart to belly. Okay, so it will cause a little more of an energy into the diaphragm, right? Because you can actually feel this pump as you inhale, it lifts up. At the rib cage, that action wasn't apparent, even though you knew it was happening. You weren't really feeling that structural shift. So let's spend a few moments here. I'm encouraging you to get your block and place it between your hands wide and actually reach back overhead with that block. As you hold onto it, try to let your hands merely push into the block. Again, if it's strained and it's painful for any reason in shoulders, then it's not the right position for you. It's not the right alignment. So you certainly are welcome to relax your grip on the block and let your hands separate and release overhead. And if you can hold on to that block, press in and lengthen thoroughly through the arms to the inside of the elbows. Define this moment as purely elongation for the front spine and experiencing that strengthening of the diaphragm. It may mentally be kind of lack in a celebratory moment, I find sometimes, but it is rather important to define these centering aspects of a practice. It gives you a nice foundation. Now, can you work the feet a little farther out? So even with the belt, you're going to step the feet farther open and then feel the heels reaching down, stretch up through the feet, push through your heels so they push and kind of scrub into the floor. And we'll leave the block overhead. We're just simply going to release the gripping potential. And then as you start to separate from that, you're going to regulate the length of the in and the out breath for a few moments, preparing to work from the diaphragmatic focus to the intercostal and the costal breathing. So inhale for a count of 4. Feel the belly actually lift in the resistance of the sand. Exhaling out for 5 to 6. Notice if you have that lower part of the abdomen to work with, you might enable that extra count on the exhale, more than if you had the sandbag across the ribs. Okay, now as you start to slide your feet in, bending knees, unbuckle, I want you to keep this sand perspective exactly connected to you. So we're going to slide the block away. I'm going to keep it nearby. I might place it under my inner right leg soon enough. But when you slide down, you'll feel that contour of your back body, kind of the arching. So kind of notice here, this is that perfect spinal arch. Prior to doing a Baddha Konasana pose, this is so thorough through the rib cage. Feel if you put your feet together and you have your knees high up. Kind of notice as if you are kind of squishing your toes, like you're trying to each foot is trying to hug the other foot. So you're really trying to wrap the feet together. The soles aren't quite pressurized, right? It's just feeling the feet touching. And then feel if you can move your knees outwards. And the feet should be pretty high up. Now, if that causes pressure in the knee, inner knee, it's too high. But I want you to focus on the knees still being fairly elevated. My focus is not to push them down to the floor right now. Okay, so I have elevation with the legs. Interlace your fingers at the roots, turn the palms to the ceiling, and then as your arms push back, lengthen through the center line of the body. You might perhaps have a block touching under a leg just because it's there, but still emphasize the legs are buoyant. Now, as you release the arms, you're going to turn to your left. It's going to feel like a half twist. So you're going to turn left, and then you'll move into side sage with the block or ball in the inner right leg. But as I mentioned with the sand, I want you to keep that sand perspective so it doesn't really leave this line of tracking. It moves from the mid body and then over to the side ray of the body. And that right arm stretches overhead, maybe to the block, okay? So we keep the motion, right, of the breath still regulated so the body can continue to restore and resurface the breath back to the sand. So as I breathe in, I am interested in the costals, right, the intercostals, the muscles between my ribs, and that movement with especially the inhale part of my breath. That gives me information, right, that it's registering, intake. And then on the out breath, we might feel there's a tiny sliver of spaciousness on each out breath going forward with this position. So let's give it a few moments. And the exploration is possibly letting the weight of your body center on the props. Each part that has a prop, right, has a potential to be contacted with your mind and kind of deliver that influence of leg rest into the ball. Sandbag is weighted on the side leans into the bolster, and then all the way up into your hand, right? The hand touching to the block. Okay, now when you feel that length of the upper arm, if there is parts of it that feel kind of sequestered in the arm pieces, let's not try to analyze each part or rotator cuff, but if it feels like it's certainly pressurized, notice if you could bend your right elbow. So it's a little bit of an awkward appearance, but I lift up my elbow and I gradually feel how it moves into my full pectoral region. So the pecs, right, most of us will think of that's a chest muscle, right? But the attachment, right, is in the pit here. So we get a feeling of moving the arm a little bit open, and maybe it connects down into the waist, all the way down into the hip flexor on that right leg. Give a few moments. Okay, now, how can we continue on with this connection to the core when we do deep abdominal strength work? Okay, so I want you to just kind of ponder that before we ponderosa up to sitting. Okay, so as I let the sand actually slide off, I'm going to use my waist, not just my hip, to let it glide off my side. And then feel that fullness of the ribs, not that the arm has to be fully straight or the leg. It's just I breathe and I feel that connection in my midsection. So now we're going to come around to a sitting position, and I want you to feel the body roll over to that left side. And then when you come up, take a seat in front of your bolster, grab your belt, and buckle it up so you can prepare for Navasana, boat pose, restorative Navasana. So when I place my width around my ribs and my feet, I want this belt to be in a pretty wide loop, okay? So when I go overhead and to my feet, I might start with my feet kind of in this Baddha Konasana shape for a second, okay? So I have a sense of the adductors, the inner thigh, and then as I swoop on my feet with my belt, I'm going to bring my knees in. Maybe that's the awkward way to get into it, actually, but how else could we learn? I have my belt from my upper back to my feet, And then encourage your feet to move forward and down. That's going to be the core, the correlation, okay, to the centerpiece strength. So now as I shift down, right, if you were to use your hands to kind of rebound, you're going to feel where there's the limit, where the belt sometimes slides. I know that can be an issue in the tissues, right, with the belt, but it ought to be pretty plugged into your back. So it's a deep pressure with the belt for most of us. Arms could be forwards, they could be resting. And I'm kind of interested in how this belt is pressing into my back. So as I feel my breath in my back space, you could hold your belt too and do a mild bend of the knees and feel when you breathe that expansiveness through the back. So try to relate to the back body, to the muscles of respiration. And simply notice when you breathe that sensitivity to your lines of energy through the back into the legs, the back of the legs up into the belt, to the feet. Now feeling the body leaning back now, so you're going to try to lean back so you feel like you're on your tailbone. Certainly a tail pose, isn't it? Tail balance. Whale tail. Okay. Now finally we're going to bring the arms up. So the arms could go either up or they could go behind you to the back of your head. This depends on the belt situation, how it holds onto your body. With that practice of this pose, I think you do find ways of accommodating your belt to feel supportive. And then we stretch the arms forward and we lower down the legs. See if you can go slowly before you have to pop out of it. So feel your arms forward to the shoulders. Feel the hands on the floor. So the fingers are wide, really spider the fingers open. Lower the feet, lower the feet. Feel where you're at that point of, well, almost no return to get back up. So this is where pose patterns of strength come in that people learn, like arm balances. This is one way to practice that. So we're not going to pop up into a balance, but this is a core balance. So I want you to bend your knees so you feel a pretty strong resistance. And then as you bend the knees, draw the knees really close together and then lower down, good. And then get a feel here when you unbuckle, try to sit up, balance, and then hold the back of the legs. And I want you to slide your feet in and then reach your hands in between the knees. So you're going to scoop them up so palms are together between the knees. And you're going to lean back and maintain the bent knee pattern and try to keep your palms together as much as they can. Okay. If it feels like, wow, that's a lot of body to hold, it's interesting when you don't have the belt holding your legs up. Now it's you holding your legs up. It feels like a different weight. Guess it's you, you know? So the biceps get pretty toned up to do this position. Now lower down through the feet and then turn to side sage on the right hip down. So I've got a ball and I'm going to use the support of my sand for my exterior to work on the interior sheath with the breathing. Now as that left arm flows over, feel the attention through the backside as much. So if I find my block overhead, I'm really trying to feel my back muscles, right? It can be quite a side focus. It is a side pose, side length. But noticing the front side of the core, the posterior core, and then go in with the eyes relaxing and breathing. anything feels pokey on the body, like the block or the ball, then it's your work to kind of move that to a more comfortable setting. And it might be that the ball needs to be higher, lower, positioned right where the bone bends. Sometimes it's a good place for the ball or the block, right where the hinge is at the knee. You know, as you get to know yourself and your practice, then likely letting go is the advanced stage, right? Letting go, surrendering once you have the alignment basics, and certainly acceptance of how far you get with it is part of it. So feel the arm and the opposing equal balance of the left leg. Try to keep the equilibrium between the left arm and the left leg. Now, I like to keep shapes that link together. So it's like we're building on an inner experience, even though there are aspects of isolating pose groups. And today we are going to process moving to several standing poses and really work on prop support for those. And so to get to that shape, we're going to do our back series first. So I want you to feel if that left arm is touching down on a block. Feel if your left arm can flow a little open to the left side, you know, and if that armpit is kind of feeling a little prickly, a lot of the nerve endings in that area can be ultra sensitive to these wide spans and not a lot of room to get there yet internally. So give your body some adjusting time. I think what might be interesting is really getting some of that lymph drain before we get upright today and see how it goes. Okay, now this arm position is open. Now we're going to move from this whole upper scheme of movement we've had. We're going to move it kind of to the mid layer of the body, which is the core into the hips. So I want you to feel that left arm start to move over and down to your right. So you're going to shift right. You're going to slide your sand off. And I want you to bring your knees in to center and get your bolster centered on your mat. And you're going to sit onto it. Take a Baddha Konasana with the hold of your shins. Okay? So you're going to sit center with holding to the shins, and then kind of let the body bob a little side to side from all of its kind of deep crossover position. So try to find the spine as tall as you can, as if you are serious about the lift of your spine out of your pelvis. I know it doesn't necessarily have a connection to the ceiling right now, but as much as you could be buoyant in the very crown of your head. Okay, so feel that awareness lifted. And now as you position your knees to point up, you're going to take a block or ball between them. If you've got a ball, you might use it because it's lighter and then it won't drop on your face likely. Okay, take a blanket off and keep one behind you. Okay, now when you lower onto your back, okay, I want you to have that blanket under head. And as you lift up your feet and bring the knees, open the pattern of movement in your hips by moving the knees from side to side. Feel when you move over with the legs the cross fibers in the lateral rotators. We have these kind of deep rotator muscles that we can really feel when we move side to side, and it's kind of a craving to how do we get into them and be able to release them. So once I go over to the side, I come back center, it squeezes back together in its tightness, right? This is like it goes back and it goes over, it releases a little. So it's this alternating pressure around the rotator. So now I want you to come back into the center, and we're going to remove the block and add a belt to the mix. So place the belt, unbuckle it so you have a long belt, and slip the belt under your right foot, lift it up, left leg down. Make sure you feel like your buttocks are at the edge of the bolster. And so you really are on that edge point. So as much of your core is up on the bolster, right? At least the back of your pelvis is lifted. And as you hold the belt with just the left hand, you're going to lift up so the arm is lengthening. The left arm is not trying to lift the shoulder off the floor, though. It's just whatever your pure range of motion is all you got for this. Cross the right leg to the left and feel when you guide it over that you keep the resistance with your left hand holding the belt like you've got it on a leash. And when you cross the right leg over, explore the reach of the hand onto the belt closer to the foot, as long as your left shoulder is feeling safe. So you're not trying to struggle and use more shoulder kind of mustering into the pose. So I've crossed my leg now. It's much deeper than it was with the block between the knees. Much deeper, and it's longer hold. So the longer the hold, the more influence into that rotator. Can you let your eyes rest, your head back center? If you need to get some neck stretch, you turn your head to the right. Okay, right hand could be touching onto your ribs. It could stretch open to the right side. If you're not a real touchy person, right, but you know, it might be good for you, you might use some of these poses to actually kind of bring your hand to your ribs and touch that space and breathe and feel the breath moving, and do that anyway. So you get some of that feeling on your skin surface. And now as you push into your right heel, a lot of energy swarming around the right hip. You're going to bend the knee, and then as the leg goes straight up, switch the left foot up into the belt. Feel both feet up into your belt and spread the feet to about hips distance. Center, separate, push with the feet so there's resistance into the belt. Try to activate that pressure. And then change the footing. Left foot up, right leg down. The right leg is anywhere. It might be stretching a little out. It might be close to the midline. This would be one that you might consider when you cross the right hand up to hold the belt. Where is the right leg? Yeah, so if I swing it down and towards my left from where I am right now, if I move my right leg a little over to the left below me, I can feel a fast kind of tingle down into my left foot, right? So if I have my right foot out, it's a little less. So this might be a side. You might have a side where you have some issues with circulation, which I think are really interesting for extremity circulation back to our heart. So let it be pretty pure sensation of full stretch. If there's some tingles or strange isolated incidents of sensation in your leg, that might be information you can kind of grapple with. Maybe you bend the knee and push out through the foot. Maybe you feel how your right hand is holding onto the belt, how far up you go, crossing over the left leg. And at the same time, there's pushing into the belt. It's a nice experience to go into this rotator position, isolating a spot, but also there's features throughout the whole body you can notice. Notice where your head is turning or centering, where your breath is based. Right, it's a breath-based practice. I think that's a breath-based in what you're inhabiting is breath-based. This incarnation. So when I push through the foot, I'm going to bend through the knee, and then if I notice in my peripheral vision how the left hip to the knee is, it's almost kind of a line. It seems like a line. I know the bones are contoured, so if you were to kind of dissect, it's not all like a straight line. But kind of feel when that leg is crossed over, and then notice when the leg goes back in to go upside down, how you can take off the belt and then let the legs go into this upside down forward bend, right? I love this pose. I bring the legs up, I let them move a little back. It's not a plow pose. And I did teach it many times where we had the blanket right at the hip hinge right here. So when you folded back, it prevented you from, hyperstretch. But I think this group is fairly realistic at your range, intelligent body awareness at the movement. So focus on this back stretch of the leg, okay? Only with gravity, right? So it's not pull with my hands. It's just the gravitational forces of movement. Okay, so the side layer of the legs does not feel. And then finding where your sand is. You're going to keep maneuvering from one angle to the next, cross the sand to your ribs so that it can be pushed and molded so it's even on both sides of the sack. And then you're going to bend the knees and push the sandbag around the bottoms of the feet. The feet are separated, and then we push the feet up. You've got it. Good. Now that belly lane, the core low abdominal zone is now back into its natural arch, right on the bolster. So it's going to create this nice pelvic floor support right now, the opposite of prolapse. So you can lie on a bolster, kick your feet up at a wall or the middle of the room and get some benefits there. Poses with benefits. So my arms can open to cactus. That would be a nice position for right now. But feel if you're not sure if you're in cactus, you can kind of look over at your elbows and notice if they're truly open and out. The likelihood that they're slanted down to your ribs is possible when you're not emphasizing that spaciousness. So as you recognize the return of, right, oxygenated blood to the top of the body, right, that stagnation drains out of the lower body, that sluggishness, right, and it builds up in our base just from our walking and sitting. And so if your eyes can glance inwards, feel the belly fill and lower back down to the spine. And notice for these few moments the connection of the belly breath with the spine. Noticing that our spine awareness is a rather still place in the body, like the awareness of bones is stillness for most of us, and breath is movement. So we're trying to bring those two together so that you feel like you get this overall kind of lighting up your body awareness in a session. So getting some energy filling through your bones. So if the feet are flexing And if they're neutral, that's okay. You don't have to force the flex. It's going to happen with the sand on your feet. If there's no light between the knees, that's somewhat problematic for our hips and our back, our low back. So you want to make sure there's a little space there. And if that means you feel like you're pushing your heels a little bit out, it's likely going to be that way, right? So if you feel your normal daily habit, your feet are usually a little bit rotated out, right? It's going to move the knees in. So work on your tailbone pushing into your bolster. I find that to be a good habit. Tailbone descending. Diaphragm on its directional assignment of exhalation extends when you're inverted, right? So the diaphragm is put in an upside down position. So exhalation lengthens. So you might get a little sleepy or calm. Okay, so give it the final few moments here. I want you to adjust so you have a little bit more weight on your upper back. So you might shrug your shoulders and then let them center down and your feet might flow back. Kind of notice where the energies are at reversing that gravitational pull to the heart and the lungs. And reversing gravity's downward pull into our feet. Now try a few moments of Viparita Karani with your feet sandless. So drop your sand, bring your feet back up, and then you might circle through the feet. You might shake out the legs, have a little tantrum, but get a feel of awareness in the legs that flow back down to more than the hips and the pelvis. That's the clear, obvious direction, but actually to the heart. Okay, so we're going to bend the knees, and as we bring the knees towards the chest, hands onto the bolster, and elbows are wide. Okay, as I push the bolster forward, I'm going to pause right before I lose the bolster under my tail. Keep the knees drawing towards my chest so I have that multiple layer strength in my core. And then as soon as your bolster clears the rear and it's a little forward enough for your fingertips to touch, I want you to lower your feet down on the bolster. Okay. Now, whether you're privy to using the bolster for bridge or not, I think we all have what we're familiar with and that in our history of practice and we like to go back to. So that's fine. But I want you to practice a couple bridge poses with your feet on the bolster so that you get higher up on your spine. So when you lift up your hips right now, pelvic tilt, hips up, lifting and lifting, you'll notice that the ability to get higher up into your back happens when your feet are elevated. So this might be a pose where you slide your blanket away from underneath you. Got all these props everywhere. Okay, move them all away. All right, so the arms are down and my arms could be overhead. They could be down by my hips. You can have them either way. Okay. Now, as you lower your spine down, it's a little different without my blanket, I have to admit. It feels like the circulation is pretty nice. So when you come up to bridge, bring your arms over for drawbridge, and then feel the feet push, feel the lift of the hips, feel that ascension. Interesting for the diaphragm, right? And lower down. So I don't know if you're conscious of that diaphragmatic movement, but when you're lifting up, your intuition with your breath is not necessarily what is going to drive your diaphragm to do anything different than it would normally do. But it is strengthening the core, right? The whole core chamber. So now as you lift up the next time, bring your arms overhead. Make that statement of your feet pushing down. Your knees are apart, but they're not winging all the way out. So you want to feel like there's some pressure around your hips, some strength around your hips, lifting them up. Okay, now as you lower your spine, I like to keep my arms overhead sometimes, so I just feel the side muscles of my back lengthen. And then as I get all the way to the very space behind my heart, I feel that touch down. And then just below, at the back of the pelvis, before the tail, you might feel that little curve, and then let it center down. And wherever your arms are, place them by your hips. And take a few moments of alternating arching and rounding the back like you would in cat-cow. Just a few very subtle patterns of pressing the tailbone back and down. So it feels like a pelvic tilting, but you're not lifting your hips off the floor. So feel a few moments there, and then take your feet together, your knees out in Baddha Konasana with the feet on the bolster. That seems clear. But it is different for your inner thigh muscles. So I would encourage you to keep the feet, they slide real easily together when they're up on height. They just kind of push in and they're sealed. So with those legs sealed, you can either have the blocks under the legs. We'll be here just about 30 seconds, so you choose. You can go without them. Find where it's pretty soft for the touch to the actual skin. And then your arms could be besides those blocks or distant from your side. And then explore how the abdomen moves, and is your tailbone on its lower surface, or are you able to slightly relax your back so you feel that relaxation can actually soothe the belly to soften. So there's a hardness to this pose I find in my tailbone if I don't purposely kind of shift my ribs back so I can feel this whole core, the stimulation of the flow of lymph in the groins will be the focus. Do a few more breaths here. And if you feel antsy to arch your spine, you notice that's starting to be a little bit more evident to you, go towards relaxing it. Now with the legs externally rotated, we're going to move the knees back up to center, and we're actually going to go from external to internal in some ways right in this moment. So you kind of feel that position. Push the bolster to the right side of your mat in a side yard, kind of somewhere over there. Feel the feet wide as your mat, knees touching, so internal rotation. We're going to do a layer of all those things. So right leg stretches straight down, left leg crosses over to the bolster, and it's certainly a hip positioning. And here's where if you have a ball, you'll place it at the sacrum. And then if you have a sandbag, you'll place it on that external left thigh. So lift up the sand, place it to the left external leg, and then feel the reach of that left arm open. There you go. Sand up. Okay, left arm spreads out. This might be where you add your blankie again under your head. It probably will be kind of nice to have that, not necessarily the insulation, but it is a little bit like that. But it brings ease right to the brain. So feel where you have support with weight on your body. It's supportive. After doing this for a while, you start to crave to have something on to the actual muscle to kind of get a little bit more of a sleek stretch across the muscle and down into the bone. So crossovers, one at a time, a good minute on each side. Can you let the weight of your leg really relax into the bolster? Belly moves with the breath. Now with the knee still bending, it stays with this bending angle. We're going to slide that sand, and I want you to, in the very brief time we did that crossover, when you do take the ball aside, I want you to let your body roll to the back, but bring the left foot to the right knee, slide the right foot in on the floor, closer towards your rear, and then you're in this reclining pigeon moment. So I want you to get a feel of your foot on the floor for it. So the left hip is externally rotating, the left knee out. So try to get a feel for that left knee moving open. Now, of course, you could add in a layer of drawing your legs towards you and grip onto the back of the right leg. That's okay. And it might feel good for you as far as this whole quad relationship to have your foot on the floor and let the knee try to move open. Doesn't seem very quaddy to you, but it is this hip flexor pattern, opening out through that left leg. If I pull in, it's a little bit more of a squeeze into my hip, which might work better for some of us. So when we switch the side, I want you to get the feeling right now of this left knee open. So if you're holding the back of the right leg, you might go ahead and lower down that right foot, keep the left knee open, and then change the bolster. So you're going to move it over to the left side. So now this right leg is going to be the dominant leg. So I'm going to slide the left foot down, cross that right leg over, and try to get momentum from your back muscles to bring the leg to the bolster. Add some props. I like to do the ball first, or the block, and then after it anchors my pelvis, then I connect to the sand on the outer right leg. And then when you get that zoning of your sandbag, open out the right limb, at least the upper limb. The right lower limb is crossed over. The right upper limb is spreading out. Okay? So get that feel of turn, kind of turnment. It's a tournament. It's a turn tournament. So my ribs, if I get a hold of them with my hands, I am trying to pivot on my upper zone and feel that rib cage twist. I know, I think after a while you get so used to getting your hip to rotate, and sometimes it's somewhat easy. It really is pretty simple after you do it over and over and you repeat it. But it's now you kind of got locked in your ribs from focusing on your leg doing the work. So you might really hold your rib casing and get a feel if you can get that so it's opening to the ceiling, like any rib cage skeletally would be, like it's lying back, but it's opening to the ceiling. And maybe your head turns to the right. Feel what your left leg is doing, right? Is it bending? Is it pushing down into the foot? It's okay either way, but feel what's interesting for your right hip. My hope is that you're able to kind of open into it, because we are going to come up to standing real soon, and you want to find that these root rotators are going to be able to freely kind of flow when you get upright. So instill that foundation in that root. Hip roots. Feel the belly comfortably moved with the breath. Give it a few more moments. You have to kind of steep the tissues. You know, we're going to move the ball, then the sand, and then we come into that reclining pigeon. So I certainly try to keep it simple-minded. I roll to my back, right foot to left knee. And you know, this little adjustment period of your footing might be interesting for you with your right foot connected to that left knee. So if I do hold the back of my left leg to get this position a little bit more hipward, you might find they're both good. This seems like the elementary version here, kind of layer one, foot on the floor. But I'm really curious about this rotator, especially before I come up to a warrior pose, right? To kind of feel how this centerpiece of my body can elaborate on movement modality. So give a few more moments here, whether your left foot is on the floor or your hands are behind the left leg. You know, if you're a real hipster, you might decide, well, you know, I want to hold below my knee. That feels so dense on my hip. Maybe that's what you need right now. But feel kind of the basics, the basic essence of the movement exploration of this right inner thigh as well. Okay, now as we're approaching to come up, I want you to take a little bit of windshield wiper here. So lower the left foot, uncross the right foot from it, and then you're going to work the knees side to side, windshield wiper, and feel where the hips, right, they're across from each other. They didn't all of a sudden slip out of place. And so the holding patterns of the hips, right? So I want you to let your feet be wide on the mat, far open. And then but they're not turned out. The feet are parallel to start. And then the knees are swishing side to side. Basic windshield wiper, we've got it. So let the waistband feel the natural arch through the spine. And then as we motion, right, we're going to take our body shape to hug the legs in, and you can come up to all fours by rolling to your side and crawling to hands and knees. If you like patterns of rolling up to sitting, come up to sitting, and then move your legs so that you are positioning your knees onto your blanket. Okay, now the blanket is kind of used sometimes. I like to have it there for my knees. And if you don't need the blanket, you can pass on it. But we'll do a few moments of these patterns. You want to have a clear space. The props you're going to be using coming up are blocks and a belt. So have them kind of in the front yard, okay, kind of the front vision. But extend your arms forward so you have a pretty full reach of the hands. And then when your hands are forward, your knees are a little wider than hips distance, you're going to move to cat pose, so chin to chest. And then you're going to reach your hips back. And so it's not a natural cat-cow, but it's an extended child's pose, but the toes are under, you're active. Now when you come forward, you're going to wrestle between that cat. The neck is open. And then you're going to unfurl it all the way forward into an up dog. Okay, or a version of that hand open spinal back bend, right? So the arch. Okay, now when you come back into that center zone, I want you to hook the toes, lift the knees, downward dog, heels reaching towards the floor. And then as you extend back into your heels, you want to really feel your palms open. So the heels reach down, the feet are wider than normal in a down dog, so you have that approach of balance. Okay, now walk on back, and then as you come back, walk your feet forward, bend the knees, and then move the blanket off to the side temporarily, and I want you to approach first that hold of the back of the legs. When you hold them, can you reach your torso down so you're in almost like this standing child's pose because the legs are as wide as your ribs, holding onto your ribs, and let the weight of your head completely dangle. Okay, so I'm holding my legs, but I let my spine stretch. Okay, give a few moments here. Feel the spine stretch. Feel the hands hold the legs. Okay, now as you pattern your knees to bending, You're gonna roll up to standing. What I do want you to have is your belt. So go ahead and get a belt and come on up to standing, roll up through the spine, and then take a wide stance on your mat. Okay. Yeah, in between that wide stance, I want you to get a belt and buckle it up so you've got your belt connected in a loop and it's wider than your shoulders. Okay, this is a little bit short of a loop, small. Okay. All right, there you go. We've got to get our cat choreography down here. Okay, take your wide stance. All right, you want to have nothing on your mat but you. So I'm going to hold the belt with my arm. So I've got my belt so it's right below my elbows. I know this tail of the belt is going to get all over you, but when you bring your arms overhead, you can usually toss the tail of the belt back. It works pretty good. But now this is where you'll need to decide, am I going to have the belt wider, tighter? I certainly don't want to be too uncomfortable with my arms, but I do have the belt below my elbows. It's at the lower zones of the arms. Now the arms get pretty warm fast. So you're going to turn your feet to your left. So I want you to pivot your left foot. So you're moving into a warrior one. That's a pretty short warrior one, meaning your stance is short. So keep the left knee in that bending pattern. Clearly that makes it a warrior pose. Feel the arch scoop through your spine, and then define the back heel pressing down. Now the focus is lifting up, that's the emphasis. We're not going to lose our belt. If it is too much for you, you can bring your arms forward and down. Just know that you're going to have that belt tail over your head. Come back forward, feet parallel to the edges of the mat. Lift up, centerpiece, arms are working vigorously. Lungs certainly working more than that. Turn to your right side, other side. Pivot, so both feet are trying to turn to that direction, even your back foot. So if your back foot is heavily turned out on this version of warrior, I want you to try to pivot it right now. Just do the best that you can. If you look back, your left foot's turned out, your knee is turned out. See if you can pivot through that back foot and find that location of the arch of the spine. Okay, now the more I arch into my spine, the easier it will be on my shoulders. That's really interesting, I find. But if I try to get really tall and I lose my back arch, it hurts my shoulders a little bit. So bend the right knee. Okay, turn back to screen, right? So your feet are in that wide stance or whatever direction you are in your room. Lifting up, breathing. Okay, now you're going to slide your hands so that you're holding the belt now behind you. Take the belt away from overhead. Feel that tingling in the arms. I want you to hold the belt with that width. If it's too small of a loop, just simply widen it. Okay, that's fine. And then I'm going to actually bring my hands into that loop, right? So my wrists have the belt around them. My loop is a little wider than it was a moment ago. I widden it out, widened, made up word, widened, widened. Okay, arms back, opening through the chest. Maybe you think you're going to go in a forward bend, but halt for a moment here. Okay, and then as you work your way down to that back leg opening, I'm going to keep my belt here into my back space. I'm not flinging my arms behind me. Certainly a little challenging. I'm going to try to move my belt up towards my elbows, so I'm sliding it up higher, and then put my hands on my lower back. So my knees are bending, my feet are trying to stay parallel the best they can, not to turn out. And then crown of the head to the floor. Maybe doesn't touch down, but it goes downwards. Now you can see how if the elbows were closer in, it might be a little more strength in your shoulders and your chest, you know that, but if I pull them in too tight too soon, it's likely going to cause, it could be gradually injurious, right? So I'm going to work with the basic nature of my arm circulation here. Nothing too much. Let your head hang. Now keep the belt onto the arms if possible. You can always come out if you're starting to feel really restrained. Bring the hands so they move away from the back, over and behind you. It's kind of cool to have the belt like this at the elbows, not holding the belt with your hands. Okay, now you're going to carefully get out of the belt, toss it away, get it off of your arm, hold your legs with your hands, and bring your elbows out wide to open up the armpits. Head centers down to the floor. If you are finding you're far from the ground, that's okay. Just hold on to your legs. Spine stretch. Okay, now as your hands start to walk onto the floor, depending on your range of motion, try to walk them forward on the ground so you're in a wide stance. Prasarita, Pada Jantasana. So I'm going to push down into my feet. I'm going to turn my feet in slightly. Right? I want to feel that rotation of my feet into the back of the legs, and then arms forward, head center of the arms. Now, can you keep this experience turning the legs? So I'm going to slide the hands in. I'm going to turn to my right foot and get my blocks. And I want you to take your blocks high up, forward of your foot, pivot your back left foot, depending on the side that you're on. Some of us might be switched up. But your forward and back leg are both trying to parallel at the feet, at the toes. So I have my blocks pretty far front. My right leg is in a bend. And I'm going to lean down my right leg and try to stretch that thigh back. Okay. Now bend through your right knee. Get a pretty strong bend through that leg. Pivot the back left heel, open. Line up that right heel so it looks like it's to the line of the left arch of the foot. Slide your block in behind your right heel. Right, so I put it a little bit out to the side so my arm has an easy balance. And then we're going to keep that right knee, turning open a little bit so it's not pivoting in at all. And left arm to the ceiling. Okay, so turn the waist. So you're in a standing side angle, right? So I'm reaching up the arm and I'm turning to my left. Left arm is up, maybe over the side of your face, but keep it so it's really focusing on that connection to your legs and your right hip. Left front thigh open. Left arm can be up or over the side of your face. You choose. Okay, now sweep that left arm back and down. Hand on blocks. Shift the back heel up. Hands on blocks. Okay? Switching through the sides, I want you to take it so you step the left foot forwards, but you come into a chair pose. So the feet are wide, my hips are back, my arms are forward. I'm in chair pose without a block between the knees, right? So I've got my feet in a wide enough stance that I can reach back. Okay? Now as you lift up out of the chair pose, I want you to stretch up with the arms, lengthen back. Right? Try to keep that experience of motion through the lower ribs to the mid ribs up to the shoulders and then lower down. Okay, right foot steps back, stretch out the legs so that you feel the hands moving the blocks a little farther forward so you have that outstretched sensation from your back. And as the right heel is stretching down, my back foot is parallel. I have that length. This is a little bit more of a full lengthening leg stretch, right? It's not a bent leg stretch yet. So feel the waistband trying to work its way forwards into the blocks. Yeah, they're good foundational patterns to be in these wide stances. And then calculate turning the back foot out. So you'll notice that the foot doesn't just pivot like you would if you're moving a piece of paper and rotating it out, right? It's connected to bones and muscles. So you have to kind of try to move that foot to turn out, slide your block in besides your left foot, and then work your way so this left knee draws forward over the ankle. And I try to keep it so my knee is not rotating in, most importantly. If anything, I feel my left arm move towards my left leg move to my left arm as I stretch the right arm up, right? So this lower leg base is really important here. Let's not get too worked up on how far to stretch the legs and trying to get lower, but trying to connect the dots so this inner thigh tissue on the left leg is working. Right? So you feel that rotation. Good. So you got to feel that expansiveness, that rotational basin from the hips. Yes. And the upper arm can go over the side of the face. It could stay right up, especially if you're working on regenerating in shoulders, right? We're not trying to over process movement, but find where we're kind of balancing and we're pretty neutral in the pelvis. It's not, not trying to maximize, but neutralize in the hips. Now that right arm sweeps back, forward with the right hand. And now as we start to guide the back heel up, I want you to make that pattern of movement to lower down the back leg. Get a blanket under the right knee so you have some support under that thigh. Yeah, get that blanket so it really is connected under the knee. And then as I move into this quad pattern of opening, you might decide that you want a bolster under your thigh too. Just kind of notice, is it limiting for you to have nothing under it? Do you have an experience of trying to get farther down through this right leg if you have something below? So I want you to do a little bit of a workshop on that one for a moment. So I like to have something to lean into, an object. And then I'm going to turn my left foot out. So we are going to be moving to some seated poses real soon. So feel that left foot turned out. Feel the front of the right thigh lengthening. Starting to slow it back down. You decide if your back knee is off the blanket, if you have a bolster or not. You know, when you switch sides, what's important here is that we honor where each person might be. Some of you might not be using a bolster. So I don't want to get too enamored to have it in between these two sides. So when we switch the right foot open, we're going to lower down the left thigh, whether it's on bolster or towards the floor. And balance your waistline to move into that natural arch. Feel the chest muscles center forwards. Good. Breathe. Necessary. Elongate the front. Balance out the back. Now with both of those legs having these kind of individual excursions, we're going to move back the hips, but take a bolster underneath your core body and lower on top of it so the bolster part at the back, the base towards your legs, does touch to the top of the thighs. Come into an upward dog version. Upward bolster dog. Feel that awareness through that center line of the body. Try to stay with that for a few moments. Feel the deeper arch in the spine. Okay, now when we come back to table, I want you to notice here, when you come back, you're going to round your back to cat, chin to chest, and then feel the arch of the spine. Okay, now come back to sitting, and I want you to push the bolster way forward, and I think we're all pretty good with one blanket for this one. So we're going to center, and I know those that are checking this out later might need 2 blankets on this, but I want you to have your bolster just in front of your body. So I'm going to use a ball under my left knee, but you could use a block or nothing, right? If your knee comes down easily, just use nothing. But I'm going to have my leg focused so it's purely sand free. But when I lift up the bolster, left knee is bending, left foot is in direction to my right thigh. It's not touching it, but it's close enough. You could do things like put a block between your foot and your thigh to create that space. But if you know it's not going to get into a bad habit, you can stay with it without any props. But lean forwards. And I want you to try to grapple with lifting up your core body. So you're not trying to push your head down, but you're pushing into your bolster and lifting up your core. So you feel that upper back connection right between the shoulder blades. I want you to connect to that. Okay, now come down with the bolster. Bring your right foot either on the bolster for the twist, or ball goes away from under the knee. Right foot goes across the left leg, and then we take that twist to the right. So if you need sand on your right thigh or left thigh because you love having sand for twists, you can add it. It does work the diaphragm a little deeper, but for what we're doing right now, specifically try to go quickly into the turn, either with a bolster under your foot or your foot across. So you could do either. Turning, I could hold the knee. I could hook my elbow to the lower right thigh to twist. Breathe. Now, as you unwind, I want you to keep this right leg as the base inside leg. So you're going to take that right foot back to the bolster. You're going to stretch the left leg out. Put the right foot on the floor, close-ish to your left leg. Ball under the right leg or no ball, and lift up the bolster again. And then lean forward with the chest lifting. Okay, so as I reach forward and we balance into the spine strength, might take you a moment to actually assert that movement of your upper rib cage. It'll come in handy when you twist. Okay, ease the lower back, lower the bolster down, left foot either on top of the bolster for your twist or across the right leg, and turn to your left. So as we prep for our final pose, it is a specific pattern today I'm trying to get us through. So when we turn, feel how the organs kind of wriggle and kind of grapple with this pressure system that you've developed here. So that internal composition is tangled up in the organs. So feel that squeeze, that massage into the vital organs. Notice the lung connection. Breathe deep. Really focus on your life force in this pose. It's a perfect pose to challenge yourself with those balancing techniques of breathing and coordinating the muscles. And then as you come out, what I'm going to ask you to do is bring that left foot out. Take the feet both out and extended, and then bolster up, lean forwards. Now, my head is in neutral versus up, so I'm neutral here. Inner thighs have some stretch. You can deepen it, but I want you to classically feel your back soften. So maybe the head tilts a little forward to balance your back. Okay, now we're going to take a supported bridge, which is what we did in the beginning. We did supported bridge at the first, but we're going to do a very classic full finish bridge pose. So the full finish bridge pose, a little more classic here, is we're going to get up on the bolster, keep your blankie here, and then as you scoot yourself up, you're going to take a couple blocks in the front of your bolster. Now, if you're tall, you're going to push them out quite a bit in front of you. And this pose will take a little bit of guesstimation, okay? The more you practice it, it just gets so much easier because you sort of start to kind of know the rhythm of it. But we're going to buckle up our belt and hook it around into a loop on the upper leg, okay, like we started. You're going to need your sand. Okay, so observe for a moment. Now, I sit on the edge of my bolster because even though I'm short and I know that I don't need as much of the spacing, I'd rather have to slide back my shoulders than trying to get back up on my bolster. So you're better off to sit at the edge of your bolster here and have more bolster behind you, okay? All right, so if you have two bolsters, also one thing now, you can put that other bolster under your feet instead of the blocks. Now, when I lower back, my emphasis here is to get my head back on that blanket. I'm gonna slide that back, but I want most of my upper shoulder blade to feel like it's just casting down off of the bolster. So it's okay if the tip of the shoulder, if that pushes down to touch the floor, but I want as much of this to extend. And then I stretch my legs forward onto the blocks. So it works pretty good. I think it is one that practice is really essential, is to repeat this one time and time again and get it fine-tuned for your ribs. Add the sand if possible. If you cannot imagine adding more to your pose, then don't. Okay, but sand's on the top of my thighs, and then I'm going to bring the arms either open, straight out, nothing too fancy with elbows, or they can go a little bit back, still over behind you. I like to keep it with the arms open so I can feel this shoulder blade tip and feeling that kind of cruise over the bolster. If you're on the floor with your shoulders, you're not a bad poser. Okay, so it sometimes works like that. The emphasis is to get the chest open. So rest your eyes, be sure that your throat is not getting too squished in. There's a little openness at the glands in the throat. You feel a little squeeze in them, massaging those glands, not organs, but glands. And then as you pause here, breathe in deeper. Lift up further in the ribs. And then exhalation, letting go. Let's go into supported bridge pose, Setu Bandhasana. And feel if there's any layer of awareness that you can move. Maybe your feet can relax a little more. Feel where the rising is in the rib cage. The completeness in the abdomen lengthening. Returning yourself to a place of ultimately balanced in the full body. And recognizing the kind of impermanence of the patterns that we do, but that continuous experience of respiration that brings you into the present. Closing your eyes, few moments here. Now let the weight of your legs be heavy. If the feet turn out, so be it, let them rotate externally. Noticing any common slogans that you bring into your consciousness, receiving your breath, relaxing on the out breath. Now with this concentration over time, feeling your body absorb the practice, processing, we're going to start to shift our sand. So I want you to move your sand and then let the knees bend so that your feet are on the sides of the bolster and unbuckle. You're going to actually let your hands hold the back of your head slightly and slide back. And then when I slide back and I feel my blanket, I'm going to slide the blanket back too. So when I push into my feet and slide back off the bolster, lift up your hips and push the bolster forward. So it doesn't need to be so wrestled with to get out of the shape. Bring your feet up onto the bolster, hug the knees into the chest, hold the backs of the legs, and feel the back body open up. You can hold the feet in happy baby pose. That can be a nice solid completion to the cycle of spine movement. Yeah, we've gone through quite a few movements in this period of time. Rocking your baby pose. And then roll to any side you want to go to. And as your hands come up, bring you up to sitting. Get a feel of the balance of the sitting bones and the balance of the hands in front of the heart space. Maybe let the eyes stay in that closed pattern so you have no idea what it appears like, but it feels right. And relax your brain to your heart center, surrendering here. Uniting our breath and exhaling, bowing into the space behind your heart. In gratitude for practice, namaste. Okay. Okay.